Welcome back once again, traveller, for another Old World battle report. A new army on the channel this time too, as my Tomb Kings face off against the might of Bretonnia. As usual, we'll waste no time and get straight into a brief rundown of each army. This time, I'm going to try something a bit different, with scrolling army lists instead of a description. It'll save time overall. The lists are still in the video description as well, should you wish to peruse them. I'm trying out a unit of 3 Sepulchral Stalkers for the first time. These are just some snake models I found on eBay, and I think they'll prove to be quite versatile in the long run. I can easily run them as stalkers, but equally they'll work as necro-serpents in a mortuary cult list, and I could even use 1 or 2 to bulk out the knights on occasion. Here's deployment. As you can see, we're playing the Mountain Pass scenario. My king and infantry are in the centre, with constructs on each flank. The Bretonnians have their Pegasi and men-at-arms in the centre, with questing knights on the left flank, and the other 2 units of knights on the right. The Bretonnians pray, of course, so I get the first turn. Ha! The fools of flesh and blood will surely soon see that the favour of their lady counts for naught against the might of Ptra's legions. Despite feeling assured of my king's sense of smug superiority, though, I myself am pretty unsure of what to do in the face of the looming threat of the Bretonnians, and don't have much of a plan at this stage, other than pushing everyone up a bit and making sure to stay out of charge range. The Bretonnians respond by advancing up in turn, staying far enough away from my units to allow for counter-charges. The Duke joins the Pegasus Knights, and they bolster the right flank. Looking at this picture now, the battle looks hopelessly lost already, doesn't it? Here's a slightly closer look at the right flank. The level 4 is in the Grail Knights and gets off a remains in play spell to boost their strength. My turn too, and here's movement. At the bottom, the Colossus and Necropolis Knights either fail a charge into the questing knights or are too far away and just move up. At the top, i.e. the right flank, I charge the Necrosphinx into the Knights of the Realm, who countercharge. My thinking behind this is that they're the only unit the Sphinx has a decentish chance against, and if I can break them, the Sphinx can pursue out of harm's way. The centre is still just a confused mess, though. I move up as much as I can, but my king has got stuck in between the Tomb Guard and the woods, and isn't really doing much useful at the moment. Disgraceful, really. The only shooting I have in the army is the Sepulchral Stalkers, and it's their time to shine, as I gleefully realize their shots do multiple wounds, so should be perfect against the Pegasus Knights. Unfortunately, they only get 1 hit, which needs 6s to wound, and fails. Okay then. Combat goes, you could say, not quite to plan. The Sphinx only slays a single knight, thanks to the favour of their accursed lady. In return, it takes 3 wounds, which leaves it on just 1 after crumble. In Brett's turn 2, the Grail Knights charge in to help finish off the Sphinx, and the Duke and Pegasi charge into the Sepulchral Stalkers, whose stand and shoot does nothing. Elsewhere, the questing knights decide not to commit just yet, and back up a bit. The men-at-arms continue to steadfastly hold the centre ground, and the bowmen plink a wound off the Scorpion. The combats are obviously a foregone conclusion, with both of my units utterly annihilated, The Grail Knights overrun, and both units then turn to stare down my flank. The Pegasi overrun to just peek past the woods. My turn 3. The Necropolis Knights and Colossus charge the questing knights. The Colossus fails, but the Snake Riders make it, and the questing knights countercharge. In the centre, the Scorpion charges the men-at-arms, after having its wound healed back. You see, my Tomb Guard and King are staring down the barrel of 2 units of knights, and I just can't have the men-at-arms flanking me as well. It might seem suicidal, but on balance, I think the Scorpion might just be tough enough to hold the big block of infantry in place for a turn or two. There's nothing to speak of in magic, I think, so it's straight on to combat. Down here, combat goes shockingly well, as the questing knights opt for sword and board to try and tank my attacks, but it backfires when they whiff most of their saves. 6 knights die and do just 2 wounds to the Snake Riders. The knights break and flee, but I fail to catch them. In the centre, another fantastic combat. The Scorpion kills several of its enemies and suffers no wounds in return. It does lose and gives ground, but it succeeded in blocking the unit, for now at least. Bretonnians turn 3. Both intact units of knights charge into the Tomb Guard, and the men-at-arms charge the Scorpion. The Pegasus Knights try a long bomb charge on the skeleton warriors, but fail. The questing knights rally and start heading across the field. The men-at-arms have more luck this time, destroying the Scorpion and reforming. Here's a closer look at the unit. You can see the Grail Monk with reliquary and some hunting dogs next to the Sergeant-at-Arms. In the other combat, the 2 lances of knights easily obliterate the Tomb Guard, doing more than enough wounds to crumble the unit to dust. The Grail Knights overrun into the King, and the Knights of the Realm overrun into the Skeleton Spearmen. In my turn 4, the Necropolis Knights try to charge the last 2 questing knights, but they flee. The Grail Knights manage to cause 2 wounds to my King, who only kills a single Grail Knight in return. After a bit of crumble, this leaves my King on 4 wounds remaining. The Grail Knights are strength 7 with their lances, thanks to a spell that was cast earlier in the game. I wasn't able to dispel it earlier due to being too far away, and now my level 4 is stuck in combat. Why? Because he joined the skeleton block earlier. Why did he do this? Well, I put him in there because of the threat of
the ever omnipresent clam on base.
I mean the Pegasus Knights. Here you can see the unit, which has lost a few skeletons now after combat. I'm not sure why it's turned round though, as I'm pretty sure the knights overran into the flank last turn. Must be an error. In Bretonnians turn 4, the Pegasus Knights and Duke charge into the flank of the King to finish him off. I issue a challenge, and the Duke nobly accepts. We do 2 wounds apiece to each other, but my King loses combat by 4 overall, which is exactly enough to crumble his last 2 wounds. The Pegasi overrun to just in front of the skeletons. Better news over here, as the questing knights fail to rally and flee off the board. This means I've actually destroyed a unit. Wow! We don't play out the rest of the game, but agree that the skeletons, the level 1 behind them, and the Colossus will fall in short order to the unstoppable onslaught. I retain the points for the Necropolis Knights. When extra points for banners and general are granted, this gives Bretonnians a total score of 2,004 points versus just 286 for the Tomb Kings. Well, there you have it. Not quite a whitewash, but the first on-channel drubbing for my dusty boys. Looking back at the pictures to make this report, it was painful to see my centre act in such an ineffectual and uncoordinated fashion, and it did seem that my right flank was doomed from the get-go, which inevitably meant that my centre couldn't have avoided being rolled over. Perhaps I should have tried to stagger my units more, so that once a unit got crushed by a lance charge, I could at least strike a counterblow instead of just fading away. The nimble threat presented by the Skirmishing Lord and Pegasus Knights did paralyze me somewhat as well. The only bright point was the astonishing overperformance of the Necropolis Knights, but that was really just lucky dice rolls. Anyway, I must retreat to lick my wounds and raise my legion back up to full strength. Thanks to my opponent. Thanks for watching the report. And if you could please comment, like and subscribe, that would be most kind. Till next time.